Every month or so, I have the opportunity to teach a class of new nurses about palliative care and chaplaincy. My teaching style is, unsurprisingly, to use stories in order to educate about a chaplain's work, what nurses might encounter in their day-to-day, and how they can best utilize the source services available to them and their patients. There is usually a question or two, a few tired after-lunch yawns, but typically, nothing in the universe shifts during our time together. You know what's coming next, right? However, during one of these classes last year, I told a story which I've shared here in the past about a journalist who said he covered the revolution of a foreign country when he was in his 20s, watching as his colleagues and friends were murdered by the government during the uprisings. This journalist had never married and never had children, and upon learning his illness was terminal, walked into my chaplaincy office to share his story. I sat and listened, not speaking more than a few words during our hour together, and he ended our visit by saying, "I couldn't let it die with me, this story. I needed someone to know about these people and what happened, and now it is your story." For me, this was a powerful transaction, one that illustrated the drive to be seen and heard, to have our life's experiences validated. And it was an example of how listening without judgment or needing to make it better could be transformative for both the teller and the listener. A lesson I think everyone, especially those working with the ill in a hospital setting, should hear. While I tell the story, and as I ask for questions in this class of new nurses, a hand raises and one of them asks, "What did you do with the story?" I was confused, so I asked her to clarify. "Well, did you write his story down and share it with other people?" she asks. "Aside from new nurses and some friends, no," I answered. She seemed disappointed and annoyed, like she was calling me on a bluff. "Well, I mean, he gave his story to you. Don't you think you should do something with it?" On this day when we're celebrating our veterans, I think of the stories I've heard from those who have served our country during wartime. There are those here even today who may have experienced unspeakable things during their time in service, who sacrificed pieces of themselves for what they believed was a higher cause, doing things they never thought they could or would do, seeing their comrades injured or dying in battle beside them, living each moment so close to their own mortality they could reach out and touch it. These, like the journalists, are stories that are sacred. They are a legacy imprinted on the souls of those who survived. And like the nurse in that class intimated, what a weighty responsibility one might feel to do something with such stories. It can eat at you, the desire to just tell someone and relieve yourself of that responsibility, while also feeling protective over it, like it's a precious object just for you to handle, feeling that no one else could ever truly understand its importance. When the nurse asked me if I thought I should do something with the journalist's story, I was taken aback. Part of me felt immediately stupid for not having done something with that story. But another part, the part that eventually went out, thankfully said, "His story became my story, like a very small chapter in the large book that is my life. It changed me, changed how I approached my work, how I valued my skill, how I interact with people. It put a face and names to the traumatic era of that particular country. You will hear stories from your patients that will impact your life forever," I said. "It will always be an honor to hear them. And to me, it is enough that I carry him, his story, and the stories of his friends with me always." And really, he didn't want me to do anything other than what I did. Hear his story and let it move me. You honor your experiences. You honor those whose stories you carry inside of you by being open to letting them change you, by remembering them when it feels good to remember them, by remembering them, by sharing them with someone you trust when it feels bad to remember them. This room is full of wonderful people, thoughtful, generous, loving, and imperfect people. People who have made a difference in the lives of countless others, mine included. Undoubtedly, you yourselves have honored those who have gone before by allowing their stories to merge with your own. Each time you think of them, speak of them, you merge. You who carry the stories of those who have gone before them, your blood carries the story of your ancestors, your heart the story of your friends and chosen family. I carry your heart with me, I carry it in my heart, as E.E. Cummings wrote. And yet in 200 years, none of us may be remembered the way we might hope. It's unlikely that they will have statues erected, paintings hung, books written, or even a candle lit in our honor after so many years. Our great-great-grandchildren may not even remember our names. Will it be enough that they will carry your story in their blood? Will it be enough that you have lived a good life? That you have given back whatever it is you could? That you have loved and been loved in return? Even if no one in 200 years knows you did. I once met a young man in the hospital during the course of his recovery who told me he felt cheated because his mother, whom he described as stunning in her beauty, never became a star. He felt that somehow he deserved to be famous by proxy, I suppose, and that the poor life choices he had made were all a result of the deep disappointment he felt due to his mother's unlucky break. This conversation struck me so profoundly, I have carried it with me for what have been years now. My question to him was, what is so disappointing about living a normal life? This drive for fame or infamy, either one will do it seems lately, can leave us feeling empty. For this young man, being a good husband, a loving father, a caring friend, these were meaningless unless everyone knew it. He needed to be seen, to be praised, to be validated by the world over. He was in his 20s and he had already given up on building his own legacy. When we come to the point in our lives where we begin to think about what our legacy will be, and for some of us that begins at 18, and for others, we wait until 90, 95 to begin that, tinkering with that idea. But when we start down that path, we acknowledge our desire for a legacy. We are acknowledging an existential need, not a want, but a need, to feel as though that we need to be remembered when we leave this earth, a need to feel as though our life mattered, that it changed something, that it left a mark somehow. The idea that we haven't mattered, that our existence changed nothing, that no one will remember us, well, it's a slippery slope from reality-based pessimism into that nasty little bug they call nihilism. And instead of taking that slide, let's re-examine what it means to create a legacy. We can begin close enough to home in Unitarian Universalism. Perhaps the most immediate example of this is Ralph Waldo Emerson, who was a Unitarian. Over 200 years ago, on his birth on May 25th, 1803, Emerson is recognized as the architect of American intellectual culture. School syllabi swell with his works, and most Americans assume some familiarity with his work. Aphorisms such as "hitch your wagon to a star," "a foolish consistency is a hobgoblin of little minds," or "trust thyself," pervade the American mind, although some people may not know that Emerson coined these. But his many impressive credentials are not what makes Emerson a fine legacy of an example, but rather the reputation of how he made people feel. A famous story goes that a scrub woman, I don't know what that is, but that's what I found, who went to his Lyceum lectures said that she didn't really understand him, but I like to go and see him stand up there and look as though he thought everyone else is as good as he is, she said. and his famous divinity address at Harvard, where he risks everything to challenge his peers to see spirituality from a broader perspective, changed the course of our faith and many others. These are but two examples of how more people still admire him because of his moral character, his reputation for brilliance, or his nobility in the face of loss than we then understand what he actually believed or wrote. They remember the feeling that he left them with when they read him or they experienced him in person. He seemed to have taken advice from modern business philosopher Jim Rohn, whose 9 principles of legacy building is another source of inspiration for us to consider. I'll share just a few. The first is, life is best lived in service to others. Jim says, this doesn't mean that we do not strive for the best for ourselves. It means that in all things we serve other people, including our family and our friends, and those we've never even met. Number 2, consider others' interests as important as yours. Our individual interests are important, but so are the interests of the 7.5 billion people we share this earth with. Number 3, love your neighbor even if you don't like them. He says, it's interesting that Jesus told us to love others, but he never tells us to like them. Liking people has to do with emotions. Loving people has to do with actions. And what you will find is that when you love them and do good by them, you will more often than not begin to like them. Number 4, maintain integrity at all costs. There are very few things you take with you to the grave. The number 1 thing is your reputation and good name. When people remember you, you want them to think, she was the most honest person I ever met. What integrity? There are always going to be temptations to cut corners and break your integrity. Do not do it. Do what is right all the time, no matter what the cost. Number 6, you reap what you sow. Definitely a cliche, but a cliche for a reason. It's one of the truest laws of the universe. Decide what you want out of life and then sow it. And 7, it's never too late or too early to pursue a legacy. No matter your age, you will have a legacy, whether you build one intentionally or not, just by your mere existence. And if you're wondering where you can begin to craft yours, just ask yourself, what kind of a person do I want to be? What kind of a world do I want to live in? So I ask, what kind of a person do you want to be? What kind of a world do you want to live in? What will your legacy be? What have you touched in your life that will remain after you die? Will it be your career, your friendships, your art, your kindness, your children or grandchildren, nieces or nephews that will remain? And if none of it, not a single good deed remains, how do we keep from sliding into the potential despair of nihilism? The Book of Wisdom in a Catholic edition of the New American Bible sheds light on this, I think. Our body will be ashes, and our spirit will be poured abroad like unresisting air. Even our names will be forgotten in time, and no one will recall our deeds. So our life will pass away like the traces of a cloud, and will be dispersed like a mist. Come, therefore, let us enjoy the good things that are real, and use the freshness of creation avidly. Let no springtime blossom pass us by. Let us crown ourselves with rosebuds ere they wither. Let no meadow be free of our wantonness. Everywhere, let us leave tokens of our rejoicing. Amen.